Since we had a freeze warning in our forecast, I thought it'd be a good idea to do one final walk through the garden. I'm sure you can probably see that there are some things missing already. We've been doing a little bit of cleanup work and a lot of harvesting and even freezing a few things. Even though we got off to a pretty slow start this year because of all the rain we had in May, I think we ended up having a pretty good year overall. Even though the gardening season is coming to an end, it's still a very busy time of year. We still had a lot of plants out in the garden, so we had a lot of harvesting to do. I went ahead and harvested the rest of our ginger, and considering about all I did was just stick it in the ground and water it, it did pretty well. We ended up with some pretty good sized roots and a lot of smaller ones. Since we couldn't use that much ginger all at once, freezing it sounded like a pretty good option. I grated some of it, then I put small clumps on a cookie sheet and froze them solid. Then I took those clumps and put them in freezer bags to be used later. That way we can break them apart and get small amounts without having them all stuck together. As well as grating some of it, I also froze some whole pieces, and that's what you see here. Before I froze them, I peeled them all and then rinsed them off. And they ended up doing pretty well, I think. Ginger is a pretty new crop for me, but I've enjoyed growing it so far. As many of you already know, we grew a lot of peppers this year, so we had a lot to harvest before the freeze hit. This is a mixed group with some hot peppers and some sweet peppers. Some of these also ended up in the freezer. Along with the peppers, we also had some eggplant to harvest, and this group in this basket was some mixed peppers and a bunch of eggplant. There were some rosita, some ping tongue, and a matoyo. This little container is full of some hybrid peppers that we grew. The row of hybrid peppers were a cross between an Oda and an unknown hot pepper, and as you can see, they were very productive. We also got one last harvest of pole beans, and I found a sweet potato that I missed on a previous harvest. Here are some sweet potatoes that I found in the side yard. I was just using some sweet potato vines as ground cover, and we still got a small harvest. It's not real impressive, but I'm still thankful for it. The Dickinson pumpkins did very well this year, and the largest one I grew was a little over 25 pounds. These pumpkins are resistant to squash vine borers, and they have very thick walls. Even though they would easily store for several months, I wanted to go ahead and get some in the freezer while they were fresh. I just roasted them in the oven. Then I ran them through the food processor, and once they were smooth, we put them in freezer bags and then put them in the freezer. I had one Musa velutina banana tree that only got to about 4 feet tall and didn't have bananas on it. So I thought I'd try to overwinter it and its pup. I cut the main plant down just several inches above the soil and also kept the pup with it. It looks like the main stem is already trying to regrow. I'm also going to try to overwinter this small canna flower that I grew from a seed, as well as a couple of turmeric plants that sprouted very late, and finally one ginger plant. One plant that I didn't talk much about this year was the yacon, but it did pretty well, and we went ahead and harvested our 2 plants we had out in the garden. And we really like these fresh out of the ground. We just wash them off, peel them, and eat them that way. They're sweet and have the texture of a water chestnut. I wasn't sure what the cold weather would do to the bananas on the Musa velutina, So I went ahead and cut one bunch of the 3 bunches and took those indoors just as a backup. Curiosity got the better of me, so I cut into one just to see what it looked like inside. And I could tell that it was far from being ripe, but it already had a whole lot of seeds forming. When they're fully ripe, those seeds will be black in color and very hard, making it almost impossible to eat one of these. They're just packed with little hard seeds. We've already had a couple of freezes, so let's take a look at what the garden looks like now. There's petunias in the toilet. We haven't been able to see them very good for a while. There are actually a couple of pepper plants that are still alive and still have peppers on them. There are some that are dead and almost dead. But the serious cleanup will begin now. Just wanted to give you a quick look at what everything looks like after the freeze. And this little group of plants here, I'm going to prolong their stay outside by moving them in the garage on the nights where it might freeze. Some of those will be overwintered indoors. Eggplants look pretty rough. But this happens every year, just part of the natural cycle. Then there's a look at the banana trees. They got nipped pretty hard. And I'll be preparing those for winter soon. Looks like, just looking at the weather, I'll be able to let them go for another week or so, at least, before I chop them down and cover them up. But there's a look at what it looks like now. Let us know how your garden's doing. And if you're just now finding this channel and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. We'll see you next time.